Chapter 2. Love or Bhakti. The nature of water is to run down. The water of the ocean stands there itself as a vast mass. The ocean is the lowest place on earth. Therefore, the water in the ocean has no place to run down. But when water is evaporated by sun and transformed into clouds, it never stands still in the sky. Driven away by the winds to mountain tops, cooled and transformed into pure water, it runs. As per the nature of water, it again starts flowing down, seeking for its source in waterfalls, gathers into many streams, runs down to lower places as river, and finally merges again into its source, the ocean. In no way can it be stopped till it reaches its source, the ocean. Though it may flow into many channels and irrigate fields, or be collected in lakes and tanks, or be stopped by springs and wells, it will not remain there for long, for it evaporates again, is transformed into clouds, and tries to reach its source as before. The efforts that we observe, as in the life of jivas, individual souls, are exactly like this. The source of all jivas, not only humans but of all creatures, is the supreme thing, Brahman. The innumerable souls living in innumerable globes, which because of an indefinable wondrous power appear to be separated from their source, are ever hurrying back to the supreme, their source. Just as running down towards the lowest place is the nature of water, the effort observed in jivas, in the form of thoughts, speech, and actions to return to their source, the supreme, is verily the nature of jivas. Hence the aim of all jivas is to return to their source, Brahman. But the rainwater, while coursing down from the hilltops, does not run straight towards the ocean. It fills any pool or pit it meets, overflows it, and runs down in any direction to the next lower one, according to the characteristics of the land. It does not even know that it is going to the ocean. In the same way, jivas engage themselves according to their taste in one activity after another, with no clear understanding of the final aim of their efforts. The rainwater cannot help but be engaged in the only activity it can perform according to its nature, i.e., running down to lower places. Whether it knows the way or not, it will certainly reach the ocean sooner or later, for it cannot stop permanently anywhere on its way. So also jivas cannot help but long for happiness, because such is their nature. Therefore they engage themselves into the only activity they can perform, i.e., the fulfillment of their immediate desires. Whether they are aware or not that the result of all their efforts is attaining their source, Brahman, they certainly will attain if it is only after many kores of cycles of creations, rebirth. As we have described above, the water in the clouds evaporated from the ocean after once raining on the hilltops does not run immediately back into the ocean in one run as a river. On its way, it is again evaporated and again floats in the form of clouds, and when cooled down it again takes the form of water. This is its rebirth, is it not? So also, before it reaches its source, Brahman, the jiva takes different bodies again and again. Each time it makes efforts in many directions, and every time when the body once taken wears out and dies, the jiva takes another body. This is its rebirth. The efforts in the form of activities of the jiva are like the efforts in the form of the running of the water. Such efforts will never cease, not even for a second, until the jiva reaches its source. Just as water, in spite of any amount of obstacles standing in its way, will wind its way about again and again, and will reach the next deep place, so also the jiva, in spite of any amount of obstacles encountered in its life, persist in making efforts in the forms of actions, karmas. Just as the nature of water is aiming at the lowest place, the jiva, on account of its nature, which is nothing but love for happiness, is always working with mind, speech, and body. This love for happiness, the jiva's nature, in its highly refined state becomes the supreme love, Bhakti, which leads it to the supreme thing, because that supreme thing is nothing but an unlimited ocean of bliss. Yet the movement of the water running down from the hilltops appears to be arrested when the water reaches a nearby pool. There also the movement is going on, but in a different direction. The water no longer runs down, but rises up. It seems then that the very nature of water, i.e. running down, is changed into rising up, evaporating. So also, on account of some enjoyment gained in life, including enjoyment here or in other worlds, the nature of the jiva, i.e. love for happiness and making efforts towards it, seems to be changed to a state of contentment where there is no effort, i.e. the nature of Brahman. But just as the water has to start running down again when the pool is full, the jiva also has to start making effort again in so many ways he wishes to attain perfect happiness, because the enjoyments gained here and in other worlds as the fruit of his actions, karmas, cannot satisfy him for long, until he reaches the goal, the supreme thing Satchitananda, which is limitless, never decreasing, ever brimming over, perfect bliss. No trivial enjoyment can stop the effort seen as the struggle of life in the jiva and make him keep still. Just as the rainwater becomes motionless, effortless, and is at rest as soon as it reaches the ocean, so also when the jiva reaches the supreme thing, it loses its jiva nature, becomes effortless, and as one who has accomplished everything, it regains the nature of Brahman, eternal peace. Since his mind form is thus destroyed, and since he is established in the supreme truth, for that great yogi there is not even a single karma to do, for he has attained his natural state. Upadesha Undiyar, verse 15. Let us suppose that the rainwater streaming down from the hilltop before it is evaporated joins a big river ever flowing into the ocean. It reaches the ocean, the source, avoiding all kinds of tribulation and delay. In the same way, the sages are ever-flowing divine rivers that take the jiva directly to the supreme thing without tribulations. The paths traced by the running of these divine rivers are the true face now existing on earth. If one takes one's course through one of these paths till its very end, one will reach the supreme thing, one's source and aim, and will attain peace. Each one of these faiths refines the love for happiness in the individual and courses it directly to the goal. This direct path of the refining of the love for happiness is the path of love, Bhakti Marga. The purpose of those faiths is to advise and encourage humanity. O man, all your efforts are in view of your happiness only. The perfect form of your happiness is bliss, the supreme state. Do not stop on the way deluded by the glamour of anything else. Awake, arise. Stop not in your efforts along the right channel till you reach your state of perfect bliss, or the real God. When the effort in the form of karmas, which is the nature of jivas, is brought under control and regulated, itself it becomes a spiritual practice, Atma Sadhana, the love for the supreme thing. Hence the very best effort that one can make is to love the supreme. This is well told in the following verse of Bhagavan Sri Ramana. The water showered by the clouds risen up from the sea will not stop, though obstructed till it reaches the sea abode. Likewise, the embodied soul rises from thee and will not stop till it reaches thee, although it wanders here and there through so many paths that come its way, or it takes to. The bird, though flying here and there into the vast sky, has no stay there. The place of rest for the bird is nothing but the earth. It is bound to go back the way it came. So also, when the soul goes back the way it came, it will join thee, the ocean of bliss, O Aruna Hill. Sri Arunachala, Ashtakam, verse 8. Bhagavan Ramana is the biggest, the most powerful divine Ganges nearest to us. Let us fall into this divine Ganges. It will take us effortlessly to the ocean of supreme bliss. Let us be carried along the path of Sri Ramana. Let there be no swimming against or across the current. Once fallen into this divine Ganges, Sri Ramana, to be insincere to his teachings is swimming against the current. To twist and interpret his teachings to fit our aims is swimming across the current, i.e., using the power of the current not to go to the ocean, but to reach some other points on either of the banks. To dedicate ourselves wholeheartedly and completely, and to live the principles of Sri Ramana, is being effortlessly carried along the current of that divine Ganges, i.e., the path of self-surrender. That which we reach, then, is nothing but the ocean of bliss. Love, when refined perfectly, takes the form of love for the supreme thing. Let us see now how the love can be purified and transformed into love for the supreme. What is Bhakti? It is a feeling of love. The feeling of love exists inherently in all creatures. It is to say that whatever one likes, this liking is the love, bhakti, towards that thing. This liking or love in its pure state is Shiva. Love is like the Ganges water. By nature, the water of the Ganges is holy. So is love. The same holy water is considered as superior or inferior according to the cleanliness of the vessel into which it is put. So also love or bhakti has different degrees of superiority or inferiority according to the different degrees of the purity of the mind of jivas. In this manner, the love or bhakti present in different jivas can be classified into 5 classes. The fully purified love will shine as Shiva. Although, as we have said previously, love is present in all living creatures, including animals, its progressive purification is visible in human beings only. Animals also have bhakti towards objects of the world. They try to obtain them through physical strength rather than through the strength of their intelligence. Might is right is the law of the animal kingdom. In the fields, sheep and goats will graze anywhere regardless of the damage to crops, while in the forest the strong animals will kill the weaker ones to feed on them. Just as love is present in beasts and birds in the form of instincts, in the primitive man the feeling of love is present only in the form of instincts or love for the things of the world, Vishaya Bhakti. Just as animals, the primitive man is also using his physical strength rather than the strength of his intelligence to fulfill his desires. He is not under any law and order of society, but is abiding by the same law that rules the animal kingdom. Might is right. Since the primitive man does not have the sense of justice, he is unaware that others have a necessity and right over the objects of the world just as much as he himself has. So he destroys anyone weaker than he in order to get whatever he wants. Even among the primitive men, it is possible only for the strongest to attain what he wants, as he finds that the things yet unobtained are more numerous than those already obtained. Even the strongest is not contented because of his unfulfilled desires, as the old saying goes. Desires are infinite. Therefore, he tries to improve his powers and abilities more and more to get the fulfillment of all his desires. But because of the results of the bad karmas done without considering the weakness of others and the wrongs of his actions on account of his selfishness, he takes his following births in bodies deficient in physical strength, but with a weak mind which is not deficient in desires. Consequently, he suffers more and more. Such a man with desires but without the strength to fulfill them tries to know if there are any methods and means through which he could get easily all he wants, and starts his search for it. Let us not forget that such people are now even in our midst. Such men are no better than beasts. It becomes necessary for those who are wise to guide the primitive man who does not know that selfishness is the root of all sins, and that all that he achieves through his might, without abiding by the right, the law, and order of scriptures, is nothing but an accumulation of sins. This miserable primitive man is growing weaker through the sins, but whose desires are growing stronger, relentlessly roams about and finally comes to a wise one who is utterly desireless, strong with penance, and always calm, blissful, and to him he complains about his needs. The instructions of such wise men are the Vedas. Vedas means knowledge. The codes of conduct regulating the life of a man, as given by the sages, are the Vedas. In other words, the Vedas are the sage himself. The impure feeling of love in the primitive man, a storm of desires towards worldly objects, Vishaya Bhakti, can only be gradually purified. He who has not yet come to the school, the Vedas, where Bhakti is purified, is still a beast. The school has 5 standards, but only one teacher. The words of the sages is the one teacher. From now on, for the sake of clarity, let us call the whole Vedas and Vedanta, which reform and refine the feeling of love in humanity, as the teacher, and the whole of humanity which needs the purification of the feeling of love as the man. The man comes to the teacher. Swami, the strength of my body is so insignificant that I cannot obtain all the things which I desire in the world. The desired things in front of me are so innumerable that even through the strength of my intellect, I cannot obtain them. Being dissatisfied by this, I am miserable. Is there a quick and easy way to fulfill my desires? Thus the man inquires from the teacher. Yes, there is. First know the cause of your inability. The world is the creation of God and is his possession. You take something from it, and you must pay for its price. You cannot use your might to grab it without paying the price. If you do so, it is a sin or an unrighteous act. Right action dharma alone is the price to pay for and the way to enjoy his possessions. Since you have acted till now not knowing dharma, your sins have weakened you. When you perform actions, the efforts you make through mind, speech, and body, knowing and following dharma, those actions are right actions. Vihita karmas or sat karmas. Hear from me what they are. For such and such thing that you desire to enjoy in this world and in other worlds, such and such actions, karmas, are prescribed as well as the proper method, time, and place to perform them. such karmas will give such results. Starting thus, the Vedas teach the man first karma kanda, that part of the Vedas which relates to ceremonial acts and sacrificial rites and the merit arising from a due performance thereof. He who accepts to live according to these instructions and to carry out the right karmas prescribed, which are not only duties but also meritorious deeds for the everyday life, has been admitted in the first standard of the school. Though his love here is only a love towards worldly objects, Vishaya Bhakti, the sense of ego in him at this stage is made to subside at least to a certain extent. This subsidence of the ego, on account of which he becomes aware of his weakness and is ready to revere and obey the wise, as well as to take his advice with humility, is the qualification required for admission in the first standard of the school. Are not there people even now whose ego does not abide even to such a small extent as to accept the disciplines of the Vedas and obey the wise? Will not be there such people also in the future? They all are like the unruly children who prefer to roam about rather than to attend school. Is it not that there are as many different minds as there are different people in the world? Is it not that according to its taste, each mind needs so many different kinds of objects in the world? Hence, the need to provide different actions, karmas, as ways and means through which people can fulfill their innumerable desires. That is why the karma kanda of the Vedas is so vast, elaborate, and intricate, since the great majority of people are in the grip of the wrong assumption that worldly objects make for happiness. The Vedas have to take pity on them so long as they are under such delusion, and like a mother, give them what they want, although happiness does not really come out of those objects. The man is now happy, enjoying the objects of the world, the fruit of the karmas and dharmas which he performed with great enthusiasm. But what of that? Can a man be so patient as to endure the delay in emptying the huge dam full of desires through a mere half-inch pipe of karma and dharma? As the man is now aware that unless every prescribed condition are satisfied while performing any of the ritualistic actions, yajna, it will not give the proper fruit result. Being himself extremely worried over the gathering of all the necessary articles as prescribed, it requires very great effort to perform to perfection even a minor ritualistic action, which man will not long for the result of Rajasuya Yajna, to be recognized as an emperor of the whole world and enjoy the emperor's privileges and prerogatives. But where can an ordinary man go to obtain the necessary articles? It can be done only by a mighty king. And even so, how many are the obstacles standing in the way of its completion? Is it not the nature of man to desire enjoyments, even those enjoyments which are the fruits of such karmas as are beyond his power to perform? The man who performs different karmas with great earnestness to appease his many desires enjoys the results of his karmas in many consecutive births and even in different worlds. But the greater the enjoyments of the objects of the world, the more fiercely is set ablaze the fire of his desires. When he has learnt that the fruits yielded by the karmas, which are truly insentient, i.e., they cannot yield fruit except by the will of the Lord, performed by mind and body are limited, the man thus pitifully reflects, are there no other means that will give more and quicker benefits than those karmas to my efforts? The man, believing he can get some clues, even for his present problem, from the same teacher who taught him karmas, comes to the teacher, the Vedas again. Innumerable births might have passed before this kind of dejection towards karmas which has now come to him, only because of performing them in the prescribed manner as taught in the first standard. All this time he remains as a first standard student. The maturity in the form of this dejection which he now has indicates is the result that he has thoroughly and successfully undergone the training of the first standard. Even today, there are many among us who are studying the first standard. Of course, they even hold high degrees in some of our present-day universities. But yet, in our school of purification of love, they are only first standard students. Why feel sorry for them when there are still cores and cores people happily wandering outside the school, not even agreeing to enroll in the first standard to perform karmas and undergo its disciplined life? Having achieved his first standard, the man again comes to the teacher and inquires, "Swami, the prescribed karmas are innumerable. I feel that I have neither the time nor the energy to perform perfectly all of them. But unless I enjoy all the fruits of all such karmas in this world and in others, I will not be satisfied. Therefore I have sought your feet to find out if there are any other means easier, by which performing karmas will yield more abundant results, and if so, to follow them." Yes, there are. All your karmas do not yield more abundant results because they cannot yield fruit of their own accord. Karmas are merely insentient. They yield fruit only by the ordinance of the Lord, God. The many different names and forms of God have great divine powers in bestowing readily upon the worshipper the many different fruits, results, through an easy worship, upasana. Therefore, if you worship the different names and forms of God, through their grace you will get, even with only a little effort, your desired objects in abundance. Should you want a successful completion of your undertakings without obstacles, worship Ganapati, the elephant-faced god. Since Sarasvati is the name and form of the goddess having powers to bestow all learning, should you desire to acquire all learning and thereby achieve name and fame, worship her. Should you desire children, house, property, wealth, gold, etc., worship Goddess Lakshmi. Like this, gods and goddesses are there who fulfill the many desires of yours. Each one of them, such as Rudra, Vishnu, Subramanya, Devi, etc., is a different aspect of the names and forms of God. There are appropriate mantras and methods, puja vidhi, to worship every one of these gods and goddesses. There are also many other methods of worship, such as yantras, worship of mystical or astrological diagrams, and tantras, use of unusual objects and methods in worship. Have all these according to your needs and tastes and start worshiping God. Through this worship the gain is greater and the labor is less than through karmas. Thus the Vedas, the teacher, instructs the man in the worship of God. The man, as soon as he hears that by securing the help of these gods through this worship, instead of depending upon the karmas in the form of his own efforts, he can get all enjoyments in this world and in other worlds, now takes to the worship of the names and forms of God with great hopes and enthusiasm. The knowing and realizing that his powers in the form of making efforts are trivial, his acceptance of a powerful supreme being, far superior to himself, and his faith in that being, are the new developments of his understanding. The following 4 stanzas, written by Sri Murunganar, a senior devotee of Sri Bhagavan, as introductory verses to Upadesha Undiyar, composed by Bhagavan Sri Ramana, will throw light upon our subject, is mentioned here. Those who were performing ritualistic practices in Darukavana, a forest of that name, were spiritually on the decline on account of following the old path of Kamya Karmas, Purva Mimamsa. On account of the deceitful egotism, they became immensely infatuated, believing that there is no God except the karmas. Seeing the outcome of karmas done while rejecting God who ordains the fruit of karmas, their pride was vanquished. Protect us graciously. Thus they prayed with tears, Lord Shiva, bestowing his gracious look on them and gave them spiritual instructions. The real great benefit the man has now obtained as the result of performing karmas is the subsidence of his ego, to such an extent that he is now humble before God and bows down to him seeking his grace. Thus he is now promoted into second standard to put into practice the instructions received by him. The man who now has become a worshipper of God with great zeal starts worshiping the prescribed different names and forms of God according to his needs and desires, with the help of all mantras, yantras, and tantras. The majority of the people who are called nowadays theists and devotees of God are studying in the second standard only. These people think that they are devoted to God. How can it be, since their love or bhakti is only toward the desired objects, is it not? Their liking, their devotion is only for enjoyments in this world and in other worlds. They call upon God only to help them in this matter. Here gods are needed by them as helpers only. Their bhakti is only towards objects of the world and not towards God. Before the man was enrolled in the school of the feeling of love in him, i.e., his bhakti was only Vishaya Bhakti, and his physical and mental strength were the means to fulfill it. When he was in the first standard, his bhakti had Vishaya Bhakti, and the karmas were the means to fulfill it. Even now, in the present second standard, his bhakti is still only Vishaya Bhakti, and instead of karmas, the different names and forms of God are the means to fulfill it. The man in this stage starts with zeal his worship. I went on a pilgrimage to Tirupati, that God of 7 hills will bestow wealth on me. I have carried the kavadi to Lord Murugan of Palani. I gave him a sacred bath with milk and the 5 delicious substances, grapes, bananas, honey, sugar, and ghee, panchamrutam. I am doing the recitation of Tirumurugatrupada. By his grace, all our afflictions will be removed, and the family will be well provided. I had the darshan of Lord Shiva in Kashi, Benares, and Rameshwaram, and I have taken a holy bath in the Ganges and the Yamuna, so I will get good, virtuous children. What can my enemy do in the court, for I am daily reciting the Aditra Hridaya Stotram. When I start something, it must have a successful end without any obstacle, is it not? So I always worship Ganapati. Throughout the year, I have been doing Lakshmi Astotram and Lakshmi Sahasranamam. Her gracious glance will bring me so much wealth. I never miss to do or attend Lalita Sahasranamam, Trishati Chandika Homam, and Sri Chakra Puja. It is Devi who is giving me everything. I am determined to go and have darshan on Chidambaram Nataraja, and Anamali Appa, and the Lord of Kalahasti, Lord Mahalingam, Lord Vaidisharam, and Lord of Kailash. Thus, on account of the waxing desires towards the objects of the world, the belief and love of the man in the second standard of our school towards the different names and forms of God, is also increasing. Now the man is more and more engrossed in worship. Innumerable births are spent in these worships. The man is also getting many more enjoyments in this world and in other worlds than those who do not worship. Is it not a fact that the imagination, the world of different enjoyments, and the different likes of the mind for them is infinite? Where's the end? Though the whole world is conquered and ruled over, yet one is not contented and wants to rule over the seas. One who has secured heaps and heaps of gold like Kubera, the treasure of heaven, will still be mad after alchemy. One who has lived long will break his head in search of the elixir of immortality. Thus there is no limit to desires. Sang Saint Tayumanavar. What Ravana, Hiranyakashipu, and Indra? For every mighty one there is a mightier one, who had become extraordinarily powerful through worship, upasana, were sorely discontented and dug their own grave with their jealousy towards each other and cravings for others' property. How much contentment can the man secure through his petty power of worship? He becomes green with envy when he comes across some others who are more advanced than he in worship. He is pining away because of his many unfulfilled desires. For the man who spends most of his time in making a living, after sleep has taken its share, only a small portion of time is left over, is it not? How many among the unlimited number of aspects of God can be worshipped every day in such a limited time available to him? According to the auspiciousness of the day, the worship of Goddess Lakshmi eats away most of the available time on Tuesdays and Fridays. The worship of Shiva eats away Mondays and Thursdays. The worship of the 9 planets, Navagrahas, eats away Saturdays. The worship of Sun eats away Sundays. Also, on the other 6 days, other gods have to be worshipped as well. Anyway, even on Wednesdays, they all have to be attended to in addition to the special gods. How can he do full justice to his desire of worshipping all those gods every day? In spite of its liking for diversity, the mind is able to attach itself to one name and form of God in preference to another. On this principle, a special liking towards one of the gods will readily grow in the man, even in the midst of his multiple worships. Naturally, with great delight and love, he spends more time in worshipping that particular aspect of God which attracts him more. Consequently, he finds that his interest towards some other names and forms of God is decreasing more and more. Besides, he feels that it is important to attend the different yearly festivals held in different holy places in honor of one or the other gods that he worships regularly in his home. Which is to be attended to, and which one not? When through his destiny prarabdha, some difficulties and miseries start to rise in his life, he begins to think that they are due only to his aforesaid negligence towards the worship of those gods. But really, it may not be so. His present destiny, prarabdha, is a portion of the fruit of those karmas, knowingly or unknowingly done in the past. None of these gods that he now worships will or can interfere with his destiny. For the performance of these worships, it has become necessary for him to maintain several kinds of cleanliness, both of body and mind, and also to take some vows to be carried out in his daily life. How is it possible for one who does not observe ceremonial and personal cleanliness to worship God? By maintaining these kinds of cleanliness, not only many bad habits, including laziness, but also many of his petty desires had to take leave of him. The anecdote given in Appendix 3 about the ultimate purpose of observing personal cleanliness, acharas, was once narrated by Sri Bhagavan Ramana and was recorded in its essential form by Sri Muruganar in verse 680 of Guru Vachaka Kovai. Our man is having now a pure way of life and has gained the habit of depending upon God, but yet not having sufficient time and energy for his worship of so many names and forms of God, at home and abroad. Not even for sleep his mind is once more in the grip of an increasing confusion. Thus the man comes again to the teacher. Swami, through your grace I have been worshipping many different names and forms of God according to your instructions, but I have neither the time nor the ability to worship them all to their satisfaction and to my heart's content. Because of this, the worship of some of them has to be neglected, and I often get into troubles and miseries. Unless I worship all my gods, all my desires will not be fulfilled. Is it not? Not knowing what to do about this, I came seeking your help with a confused mind. Is there not a quicker and easier way to fulfill my desires? Thus the man inquires, with great hope from the teacher. Yes, there is. Listen to me. God is only one. The one God alone is worshipped in different names and forms, each of which is said to have the particular power to fulfill a particular desire of the worshipper. He is not many. Up to now have you not been worshipping his many different names and forms with love? Now tell me, towards which one of them do you have the greater love? Whichever of them attracts your mind most, that one is your beloved God, Ishtadivam. Thus asked the teacher, do we not love one particular deity more than another among all those names and forms, such as Shiva, Vishnu, Devi, etc.? The non-Hindu readers also have a preference towards a particular aspect of the Godhead of their own religion. Is it not so? Let us now suppose that particular aspect of the Godhead loved by the reader has been mentioned by the man as his beloved God, Ishtadivam. After thinking deeply, the man mentions to the teacher Lord Krishna, the deity who all this time has absorbed his mind and made him forget the worship of others. Just as we have said at the beginning of this chapter that the teacher stands for the Vedas and the man stands for humanity, let us assume now on that Lord Krishna stands for the beloved God, Ishtadivam, worshipped by the man. The man adds, the incarnation of Lord Vishnu the whole, manifested through the young beautiful blue form of Sri Krishna, who came to protect the good and destroy the evildoer, who gave us the holy Bhagavad Gita, is keeping my heart at his feet. The teacher says, yes, let him be your beloved God. Sri Krishna is the only supreme thing. All this time it was only he who through different names and forms received your worship and fulfilled your different desires. Moreover, your attention was divided between so many gods that you were not able to direct it fully towards one of them in particular. As you have now understood that it was Sri Krishna alone who acted through all other gods, gather all your attention and give it wholly to him. To him alone ask, whether you want gold, wealth, learning, children, success, or whatever more you would like. He is the wish-yielding tree, Kalpataru, that will give you everything you wish for. Now your worship has become easy. Do it towards your beloved God to your heart's content. Get all your desires fulfilled and be happy. Hearing these words of the teacher, the man's confusion was removed. He was now assured of having all his desires fulfilled by the one beloved God towards whom he can now give the whole of his attention. And he is also relieved of the trouble of worshipping other gods, which he had done so far without much interest. Having thus been instructed to worship the beloved God alone, the man, after paying homage to the teacher, happily returns home. The man who is now worshipping only one God, his beloved God, is in the third standard of the school where love, bhakti, is purified. The practice of karmas was done in the first standard. The worship of different names and forms of God was performed in the second standard. The worship of the one beloved God is performed in the third standard. The third standard has two sections. A, namely, worship of God with love for objects, Vishaya Bhakti, and B, with love for God only, Diva Bhakti. As our man still has only the love of objects, he is in the section A of the third standard. Not liking to go against the words of the great ones, even when one wants mere food, clothes, and such small things for happiness or otherwise, liberation, moksha, the greatest thing one should not try to get, but only by coming and asking you, have I come to you, O Lord of Vadulur? Thus sings Sri Ramalinga Swami. As per the above words of Sri Ramalinga Swami, the man seeks the fulfillment of all his different needs and desires only from his beloved God. What he loves here are the objects, and his beloved God is only the helper. That is all. But his mind, which all this time was diverted towards many gods and thereby weakened, is now focused on his one beloved God. That makes his worship far more effective. Because the mind branches out into innumerable thoughts, the power of attention of each thought becomes very weak, as though as thought subsides more and more, the mind becomes one-pointed and thereby gains strength. Who am I? Bhagavan Sri Ramana. The mind, which is nothing but the reflection of the self, is a very great wondrous power in its pure state. It is so powerful that it can create and see anything which it thinks of intensely in gross form. The main point of yoga is to collect the scattered thoughts into one and fix the mind on that one thought only. The worship of God is a means to focus the mind on one point, setting aside the other innumerable thoughts concerning one's daily activities rising in one during the waking state. In the path of love, bhakti marga, when such confidence in God will look after everything in my life, why should I think and worry about it, increases. Thousands of unnecessary thoughts will depart. But this alone is not sufficient. The important point in bhakti yoga is to fix the mind on one name and form of God, and not change the worship from one name and form of God to another, and thereby allowing the mind to branch out into so many thoughts and waver. On the other hand, composing bhajan slogans such as Ramakrishna Namo Ramhim, Lambodara Sri Shunmokaya, Bhamamari Buddha Shiva, Parvati Alu Jesunata, mentioning all names and forms of all gods and all religions and putting them together in the form of one verse of universal prayer or japa, and recommending all people to do japa, or recitation of it, will not be a sadhana in bhakti marga. In doing so, the mind will not become one-pointed but will only become scattered. An interreligious bhajan like this can be useful to a certain extent to religious reformers as a contrivance to point out that God, who is worshipped under so many names and forms in different religions, is one only. To the secular masses who, not having the right discrimination, take to the religious fanaticism in preaching, and who by doing so only quarrel among themselves and waste their time and energy away, but for an aspirant, sadhaka, who wants to attain God, this shall in no way be the spiritual practice, sadhana. Through this practice, the mind cannot cling to any one of the names and forms of God. The right sign that one has understood that God is one only is one's clinging to one God only. Spelling and singing so many different names of God only betrays the lack of faith and understanding of the oneness of God. The worship of His beloved God under a particular name and form becomes a way for him to see the formless Supreme in that form. One may worship in whatever form, giving whatever name. It is a way to see the Supreme in that name and form. Uladu Narpadu, verse 8. Though his love is toward objects, Vishaya Bhakti, only because of the intensity of his worship, along with the fulfillment of his desires, he is even able to see his beloved God, Sri Krishna, in person whenever he calls upon him. If one has so much earnestness and love, one can rouse God consciousness even in a stone. Sri Ramakrishna said once. Here let us remind the readers our statement that all we see outside is only within. In answer to the appeal of Sri Arunagiri Natar, Lord Subramanya appeared in person in a pillar in front of all those present, including the king. In his third year, Sri Jnana Sambandha, called Appa and Amma, father and mother, and Lord Shiva and Parvati appeared before him in persons and gave him divine milk. Sri Sundaramurti, one of the 63 saints, called Lord Shiva when in need of whatever it happened to be, gold, rice, house, wife, and he received it. From his very young age, Sri Namdev of Pandaharpur was able to eat, live, and play with Lord Vital. Sri Ramakrishna was able to live with Mother Kali Devi, like a child lives with his mother. Many more are such incidents in which so many great devotees were able to enjoy the association with God in person in his different names and forms, to prove that one can, through one's devotion, see God in person as the man did. In the West, St. Teresa of Lisieux, a Roman Catholic nun, in the constant company of the child Jesus. As his beloved Krishna answers him whenever he calls him, the man was able to get all his desires fulfilled. When we see daily in front of us that man, who is an insignificant and powerless ego, is able to help another who is equally insignificant and powerless, is it impossible, and is it not a wonder that God, the all-powerful, helps such a man? According to what we have already mentioned, we see ourselves as God, world, and soul, only through the creative power of our mind. The very moment one thinks that one is a jiva, individual soul different from God, the gracious hands of that God stretch out to help one and pull one back to the supreme knowledge of oneness through ever so many ways. Thus the man is able to see his beloved Krishna and associate with him. Though his beloved Krishna often appears to him, he deliberately does not fulfill some of his desires. For the man is not able to discriminate between what is good and what is bad for himself. Moreover, God will not allow his ego to wax more and more in arrogance by thinking, "My beloved Krishna is there to grant me whatever I want." This is why, in his divine play, Leela, the Lord either refuses to fulfill some of his desires, or he fulfills them in such a way that their fulfillment will bring troubles in their train. We should not forget that there were such incidents even in the life of those saints whom we mentioned above. In order to marry Sangili Nachiyar, Saint Sundaramurti requested Lord Shiva to leave the temple and to reside one day under a certain tree. Lord Shiva's compliance with his request resulted in the loss of both eyes by the devotee later on. In order to reward the spirit of service of Saint Apar, which was lacking in Sri Jnanasambandha, Lord Shiva gave both of them a gold coin of equal value, but later on when the coins were tested by the goldsmith, Sri Jnanasambandha's coin was found to be of less value. On being ridiculed by Saint Gaurakumbha as the unbaked clay pot in the assembly of sages, Namdev was very offended and went to his beloved God, Vital, for support. but he also joined with his scoffers and confirmed him to be an unbaked clay pot. There are many more such examples. Many of those whose further progress is retarded and who are wasting their time, even lives, altogether, after attaining the stage in which the man now is, thereby losing the right path. They boast, "Look, I have seen God. The goddess appears to me in person. Look, Lord Sitarama never fails to respond to my calls. Truly, whenever I call, Lord Subramanya readily comes and attends to my needs. I assure you that I can do anything for anybody with the help of my beloved God." Thus they gather a crowd around them and distribute sacred ashes, vibhuti, and kumkum. This is downright foolishness. If one's ego has subsided, at least to an extent that one understands, God, who is gracious to me, is ever gracious to others also. God who helps me equally helps others. This kind of downfall will not happen in one's life. Only such an ego which is unwilling to subside, and rather very willing to jump up, easily gets caught by the infatuation of siddhis, thaumaturgic powers, and becomes a slave to the vile courtesan of flatteries, losing the right purpose of this human life. Even though all the worlds are renounced as a straw, and all the scriptures, the Vedas, are at their fingertips, for those who are caught by the vile courtesan of flattery, it is indeed very difficult to free themselves from being a slave to her, Maya. Thus warns Sri Ramana in verse 37 of the supplement to Uladu Narpadu.